Okay, we're going to go into Missing Knowledge of the Ancients, Part 3. If you haven't seen Part 1 or 2 yet, I don't have it in the top left-hand corner like I usually do, for that's going to lead to Part 4. I'd probably suggest you either go to the website, my channel, and look up 1 and go from there, or just continue, because these are separate entities. Just go from this one, watch it, and then 4, and at the end of 4 in your top left-hand corner, as I will at the end of this one going to 4, there'll be the go to the next one, and after 4 I'll lead it back to 1, so anybody that gets that can be able to see 2, 3, 4, 1, or whatever, and do it in that range. This right here is an engraving from old times, but really in my mind, when first seeing it as I was a kid, it made me think of Max and the things that were 1960s type of artistry and stuff. And I don't know if you remember the Mr. 12 Toes and things like that and stuff. And it definitely has that kind of feel to it. We see over here on this side, the sun is actually a being, and which makes sense when we know everything we know now about ancient religions. And if you'll look, what he's doing is poking his ass out of the cosmos. And at the time of this engraving, they were believing somehow that the blanket of stars were all right there, and you could go through that. Now, out there you see clouds, but they were talking in ancient times about nebulae, and it looked like a blurry star or a cloud in the sky in this little spot. What we come to find out now, a lot of those, while there might be nebula like the Crab Nebula, and get named for that, a lot of those nebula are whole other solar systems, well, a whole other galaxies with thousands of solar systems in each one. So some of the stars that we look at in the sky are not a star. They look a little blurry. That's because that's a whole another galaxy. But this wizard type individual here with his Phrygian type cap is going out. And also what we see up in there in the corner here is something that looks like Ezekiel's wheel, and the idea of the zodiac and the spinning of time. We're going to see something like that at the very end of this also, so it'll kind of be like bookends, if you will. So let's just go ahead and get into this. Lost knowledge of the ancients. Were humans the first? This is part 3. And we're talking about science in antiquity here. The achievements by modern science are phenomenal, but with our background of spaceships, skyscrapers, wonder drugs, and atomic reactors, we are apt to minimize the scientific accomplishments of the ancients. But this is a mistake. So let's look at a few of these things that were brought by ancient Aryans or Caucasians. Dealing with traffic issues. Well, the peoples of the past had many problems which confront us today, and they were sometimes solved them in the most almost the same manner as we do today. And it's probably why we do it today, because someone had figured it out in ancient time and it looked like a good example. For example, ancient Rome would change some street arteries to one-way traffic during peak hours. The people of Pompeii also used arm-waving traffic police to cope with rush hours. Sounds familiar. And you've heard the ancient story, though, that all roads lead to Rome. But that's not necessarily true, for the Etruscans made a lot and others, and we found these ruts going all over the place, and even in Proto-Indo-European lands, of these deep, deep ruts that these carts went across thousands and thousands of times to try to develop that type of rutting, unless you're to believe someone dug that rutting all along where they did it at. But Rome connected to a lot of the other cities, and they made some of the best roads, and thousands of years later, here we have something that looks like a pretty decent road, and it's got a causeway in the middle of it, and this traffic goes this way, and this traffic goes this way. But during peak hours, they may trade that around and make it a one-way street, and then the next street over is one way going the other way. We do that today with traffic signs and things. You can look at pictures like this and see this lazy country road, and you take the high road and I'll take the low road situation, and you think, man, they sure did go out of their way for just some BS carts and horses and stuff. But no, they went really out of their way in everything they did. So did many people all through ancient times. We almost kind of screwed that up, but we've come out of it now a little bit different and stronger still. So, street signs were curious names were used in Babylon 2,500 years ago. So they had street names with weird names, and people knew streets by the name. One example was the street on which no enemy may ever tread. That was the name of the street. And so from that point in, no enemy will ever pass that point. It's just the regular old thoroughfare for everybody else, but they have this constantly in their mind. At Nineveh, famous in Sumeria, the following no parking signs were also displayed. It was a royal road, let no man obstruct it. The signs were certainly more efficient than ours because instead of parking lot fine tickets, chariot owners who disobeyed them got a death warrant, perhaps. Isn't it cute? The ancient city of Antioch was the site of the first street lighting in history, and the Aztecs set a permanent colored strip directly into the paved road to divide the two lanes of traffic, like the little median. Our streets and highways usually only have painted lines to separate the lines of traffic. They just did it out of a separate, different stone. They realized if they painted it, it would wear off and they'd have to repaint it again. Nowadays we have modern paints that are real resistant, and they still go around and repaint them quite often. Heron, which we talked about before, is an engineer of Alexandria, built a steam engine which embodied the principles of both turbine and jet propulsion. If not for the repeated burnings of Alexandria Library, we might have had a story about a steam chariot in ancient Egypt, or not far after. But at least we know that Heron also invented a speedometer registering the distance traveled by vehicle, and I speak about that at the end of part 2, I believe. City planning and heating. Well, excavations at Mohenjo-Daro in Harappa and Kalabanga in Pakistan and India have disclosed the surprising fact that a system of town planning was in operation 4,500 years ago. The streets of these ancient cities were straight and had rectangular blocks. A superior water supply and water drainage system were also discovered, and those Aryans knew how to build cities. That city probably would have decayed over time like a lot of them do, but after it was built fantastically so, it seemed within a few hundred years, the river, due to climate changes and things, changed, and then the people all left that city and went another place. I did a video out of it, but because it connects Aryans to them, it's banned in 244 countries. Here's Mohenjo-Daro, and you can see they're all made out of these stone-fired bricks that we know very well connect to the Sumerians and all the people like that. And Egypt too at its first start, but these cities were built with kiln-fired bricks. We use those on houses today, by the way. Because of their strength, they were also used by the British in the construction of the railroad bed on the Karachi-Lahore line more than 100 years ago. Well, hell, this house right here has them on the outside. Yeah, they're different shapes slightly, and different colors or whatever, but duh. It's also remarkable that bricks manufactured today in Mohenjo-Daro are made according to prototypes from those old ruins. This demonstrates that technology had reached a peak in the distant and unsuspected past of India and for some reason progressed no further. I probably can tell you why they got to a point and didn't go further. From then on, everything was done on imitation of the old techniques. Well, it seemed like the Aryans really got with the people and helped them out to a certain point. And sometimes that certain point was they rebelled back against them and they said, all right, I'm out of here. And they were on their own. This is what's put in the Mahabharata. Central or hot water heating was invented by Bonamain at the end of the 17th century and then perfected later by Devoir. Yet 4,000 years before these European inventors, wealthy Koreans had spring rooms warmed by hot air which circulated in vents under the floors. Well, they were in contact with those same people too, but ancient Romans used heating of a similar kind. During the Middle Ages, the scientific devices of antiquity were forgotten, and people of Europe had to shiver for many a century. Also, we had those cold floors, and that's one of the reasons people use carpet rather than cold flooring. But nowadays, they have underfloor heating and stuff, and you can kick that on. Even heated toilet seats, and then They have detectors whenever it detects you getting close, so when you get close, it turns on. So by the time you sit down, you're already pre-warmed up. Isn't that sweet? So here's like a bathhouse in Rome where it had a flooring over this, but then there were fires put down below it here, and that heat that would boil up under here would warm the bathhouse. It's called a hypocaust, or a hypocostum in Latin. In the Roman baths, Bath, UK, a hypocaust is an ancient Roman system of central heating. The word literally means heat from below or under, from the Greek hypo meaning below or underneath, and kain to burn or light a fire. The caustum and costa goes with more of a Germanic languages, as in Holocaust. Oh no! Decorative features for homes and bodies. The prehistoric clay of Catalhoyuk in Turkey is over 9,500 years old. Prehistoric city. Pieces of carpet, though, have been found in the ruins, which were of so high quality that they compare favorably with the most beautiful ones woven today. Oh yeah, no savant in the last century would have attributed such an age to these carpets, or seeing the civilization would have said, well, they've got weaving and carpets, but it's amazing what people had. So when we say we're looking for a lost civilization, we found it. There they are there, and going back to Göbekli Tepe, but Göbekli Tepe wasn't like, it goes back further. It goes back further. The beautiful head of a Sumerian queen, Shubad, or known as Puabi, displayed in the British Museum, shows that a long time ago people were very much like us. The lovely young lady wears an amazingly modern wig, large earrings, and a necklace. The sophisticated girl who used cosmetics, a wig, and expensive jewelry died in a ritual suicide in 2900 BC, 2150 years before the traditional founding of Rome in ancient Sumeria. And look at this headdress that she's got, made of leaves, and it's got little berries all around it. Some people have said it may be holly they're trying to recreate or something, for the leaves look similar to that, but it's really just like a common leaf, berries and things going around on it, and quite pretty. And they show this depiction of her, but knowing the Sumerians, she could have easily had blue eyes. And if she's supposed to be Queen Puabi, you can bet on it. Textiles from Tutankhamun's tomb were made out of linen thread so thin that no modern machine or man can reconstruct them. Well, it would require another setup to do it. You know, people have this 230 count strids or whatever, and then there's percale or whatever, and it's even better. This is a full step beyond that. But I've made videos before, but it's been a couple of years about Gossamer Fabric and this see-through light fabrics that they had then, and you can see it in some of their arts and stuff, right? Tutankhamun's knife was also unique as it was made from meteorite iron from the sky. Of course, the ancient Caucasian blue-eyed Egyptians from the pre-dynastic on through, of course. If you just look up blue-eyed Egyptians, you'll see what I'm talking about with these crystal blue eyes that they had. That's something else that could be on here, but it doesn't have enough of an effect, really. But they say that their skin is made of gold when they're a god, and their bones are made of iron. And iron comes from the sky, and when Tutankhamun went to take that celestial boat ride in to meet the gods through the sky, he was given a meteorite iron knife. And this screws up the whole idea of the Iron Age by a long time. We've made other finds that have crept it up over 600 years longer than they give credit for before, but then you look at something like this, and what's that? Well, it's all made from meteors. Okay, well, is that what they made all their chisels out of? Because this crap ain't going to work. Here's an example of it, and you can see what would have been wrapped around him. This is part of an embalming cloth, right? For some reason, the skill of jewelry making and architecture in ancient Egypt was more advanced in the earlier periods. One thing you can certainly see about that is those crystal blue eyes that they have, but also in all of the pots that they have that are made out of types of granite and stuff. But in that same effect, they have things that look just like pottery, but they're made out of solid stone. And these solid stone looking things are just so intricately made, the pottery that next to them pales in comparison. It almost makes no sense, but you can see some remnants of that from the Natufians. And the only belief I have connected to it was that they had been making and polishing and keeping these things for hundreds of years. And whenever Egypt got going, they took that, and to show their strength in that moment, they put all of those in there. They found hundreds of them, hundreds, thousands of them. So, among the pyramids in Egypt, the first structures are superior in workmanship too. It starts off with mastabas and then a step pyramid and then incredible things, and then all of a sudden it seems to go downhill. The wave of progress markedly starts downwards in Egypt after about 1300 BC, but after the 25th dynasty and they're taken over, and even though it only lasted 82 or 90 years, from then on they were vassals basically under other people, and it went down from there. For when they were controlling themselves and helping others out, it seemed to work fine, hint, hint, but whenever you take it the other way, it ruined it all. In 3100 BC, King Menes of Egypt carried out a vast engineering scheme of diverting the course of the Nile in order to build his capital, Memphis. No kingdom had ever attempted to execute such a gigantic project as this that we know of. Here's a look at the White Temple. Which one is this? Great White Temple of Ptah in Memphis. And you can see those Caucasian Egyptians. He's got a dog. It's out here in the big statues that are there. Yeah, they use red ochre for males, and females are drawn pale. That's the same as Greeks and all the other guys. Yeah. Nothing weird to see there, but a lot of people try to make it into something, and it's definitely not. What possibly just happened? Wow, that was weird. Ancient interior plumbing. Although porcelain flush toilets are not necessarily a mark of high culture, they do prove the presence of developed technology in sanitation. Only 200 years ago, they were conspicuous by their complete absence. Yet 4,000 years ago, private toilets with a central system of stone drains and ceramic pipes were common in the city of Knossos in Crete, for they had some gnosis. The chambers, excellent bathrooms. The rooms of the Palace of Minos were also ventilated through air shafts and cooled air whenever it did so. With its air-conditioned chambers, excellent bathrooms, and toilets, the palace was not only modern but large as Buckingham Palace in England. Here's a depiction of what it would have looked like in elder times, and it's quite huge. There's only parts of it left, and they had those cattle horn tops on everything. Right? King Minos. Pipes for hot and cold water have been found in tiled bathrooms at Chan Chan, the capital of the Chimu Empire in South America, which flourished from the 11th to 15th centuries. Ancient epics of India describe similar scientific accomplishments by the early people of the land of the Gagnis. And we know who that probably had to do with too. Here we're looking at the ancient ruins of Chan Chan, and you can see that whenever they did this cinder block brick style, they stood them on the edge like a diamond and used that way for the pressure rather than straight down on the square. It's a different way of doing things. One wonders how much other stuff is up under these hills that are all around it. These achievements by the people of antiquity were not surpassed in later centuries. In the Dark Ages, mankind experienced a fall in scientific progress, and it only during the last 300 years that science began to pick up again. And I wouldn't call it began to pick up. We've turned the most incredible 300 years into, being able to fly and now go into space. I mean, looking back on it, we're like, yeah, we did that, but it is the most incredible thing that's ever happened on Earth. Those amazing Caucasians. Achievements in transport. Oh, it's not selfish or racist or anything to say that. It's being proud with my culture. You can be proud with yours too. There's nothing wrong with being proud in your culture. Achievements in transport. The first cart and first boat were built by the Sumerians in the 4th millennium BC or 4000 BC. The next big leap in transportation came only in about 1802 when the steam vessel was constructed, and the first train followed in 1825. This acceleration in technology and transport climaxed with the invention of the airplane by the Wright brother Caucasians in 1903 and the first manned flight in a spaceship in 1961. And no, that wasn't the culmination. It would have been Apollo and da 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 for the first space flight, was just saying, oh my God, we can do it. There's space, da da da. And then we had to develop all the technology that allowed us to do so. Here's a picture of the Sumerians in one of their very first carts that they have. You can see all of his extra weapons in. He's got the carts run through a ring that comes up through, and a ring assembly even on the back of these onagers or donkeys that they have here. Even have a throat thing and stuff. And no, they aren't decorated fancy like the Egyptians will have eventually after the Hyksos show up and they've got the advanced carts, and no longer is it donkeys, but it's horses. They're much faster, more reliable, and don't sit down on you and become an ass. The Latin name is asinus, and it's where it comes from. If you look here, there's a two-part wheel, famous two-part wheel, and they even cut it out to do so. What's odd about this is people don't usually realize this is all made out of shaved ivory, which they had to boil it and then shave it off with like knives and then cut it all out to make it do it. The background is lapis lazuli, and the red stuff has been impregnated with red ochre. It's on the Sumerian battle standard of Ur. After the voyage of Apollo 8 to the moon, New York Times gave the real credit for this historic feat to men of many centuries and centuries before: Euclid, Archimedes, Newton, Kepler, Copernicus, and many others. It is wise to see our achievement in this light, because behind our atomic scientist stands Democritus. So looking at this moment here, if we were to have a proud moment for Caucasians like that nowadays, just imagine how people would act. It's gotten real pitiful that everybody's just so jealous of the Caucasians and what they've come up with that they try to make all these little things like it's some reality. It really, really sucks. It is wise to see our achievements in this light, because behind our atomic scientist stands Democritus. Our aviation and astronautics engineers also had a predecessor in antiquity, which is Heron with his jet, or you can see derived things come from that. I get that back right. Behind our cybernetics hovered Daedalus with his automatons and robots that were made back in the day. If you're not familiar with it, you should look it up. The source of modern science lies far away in time. Whenever I see Daedalus, I always think about the old movie Space Camp. And whenever they got trapped without having enough oxygen to be able to make it, they figured out Daedalus. It's where they get the name from. And they go and get extra air and then come back and save everybody. Remember that? Jinx put Max in space. Jinx gets Max back. And he comes into the room and tries to tell him that he's done that. And the guy has enough sense to listen to him, and he says, Max, how can you help NASA today? And he starts spelling out to him, and he's like, what? But as he gets pushed out the door and they tell him to get the hell out of here, he realizes that's Morse code, and you're calling out. And he looks and he says, Max's code, and the light's blinking, and they realize they now have conversation that they never had before. It's a little hokey, but it's still a good movie if you've ever seen it. So here's this guy again, and this time I get to talk about it in a different way, where he's smiling, got his little French type hat on there, and if you look at him, he's kind of pointing at things. And I want to make note that what we're looking at here is a globe, and on that globe, the Democritus is holding are all the constellations that we still know of today. And he looks like he's hovering his arm over it. And you look at him, he's kind of like, ah ha ha, I'm not going to show you. Well, if you open up this shell here on the inside of it, what he's not going to tell you is there's a sun at the middle of this thing, and the Earth's out here and spins around it. Ha ha ha. So that's the end of part 3, and now we go to part 4. It'll be in your upper left-hand corner. And again, at the very end of that part, it'll have part 1, and you'll be able to go back to the original beginning. Like, share, and subscribe, and hey, put some comments down below. If there's something that they're all forgetting out, for there are quite a few of them. I can even think of a few off the top of my head. But it's amazing what those Caucasians have done in antiquity through time and in modern time and herald the civilization. Hell, Everything we're talking on and looking at and everything else is all created by them. Yeah. Wouldn't it be amazing if everybody got behind them instead of jealously hating them? That's probably for another vid, though. Like, share, and subscribe, and enjoy, guys. On to the next. Peace.